Against this backdrop, we'd like to remind you that the Russian Federation categorically condemns the act of military aggression against Iran by the US and Israel in violation of the UN Charter and the basic norms of international law. Such actions cannot be justified in any way, shape, or form.
It was precisely the United States that unilaterally withdrew from JCPOA, which triggered the Iranian nuclear crisis. It was also the United States that, in total disregard of its own credibility, on 2 occasions joined Israel and resorted to blatant use of force against Iran during the negotiation process, which rendered the diplomatic efforts futile. The United States, as the instigator of the Iranian nuclear crisis, its conduct violates the international law and the purposes and principles of the UN Charter. China strongly opposes to such conduct.
I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Mr. President, we are disappointed by the fact that the majority of Council members didn't manage to muster up the courage and wisdom to speak out against this flagrant violation of decisions previously taken by the Council. Responsibility for the lawlessness that's being unleashed at the Council falls fully and squarely on the shoulders of the US presidency, as well as on the shoulders of delegations supporting it or condoning its single-handed decisions, the decisions of the US. We regret the fact that some colleagues are continuing to follow Washington's lead, which already back in 2018 thwarted the regular implementation of the JCPOA by illegally and unilaterally withdrawing from the nuclear deal and continuing to do everything possible to nullify any prospects of reaching a diplomatic agreement on Iran's nuclear program. The position of the Russian Federation, in light of assertions about supposed activation of the mechanism for reinstating Security Council resolutions on Iran, anti-Iran, is unchanged, principled, and consistent. As I noted already today, the UK, France, and Germany could not have activated this instrument. Now, I won't delve into the details. Our position is spelt out in detail in many letters addressed to the Security Council and the General Assembly. All colleagues can read those. I will simply remind you of the main points. First, these countries, strip themselves of the right to invoke the snapback by their chronic violations of the JCPOA and Resolution 2231. I am referring to the inability of the European Troika to fulfill their obligations to ensure economic benefits for Iran stemming from the lifting of EU sanctions which were in force up until 2015. I'm also referring to their illegal decision to resume unilateral sanctions pressure after Transition Day, the JCPOA Transition Day, that is 18th of October 2023. International law is fairly clear-cut on this issue. A party that does not comply its obligations under any agreement or treaty cannot invoke the instruments contained therein in their own interests. This is what the so-called clean hands doctrine speaks to, as does the Pacta sunt servanda principles, not to mention advisory opinions issued by the International Court of Justice. Second, the JCPOA, which is an inextricable part of Resolution 2231, of which the JCPOA is a part, clearly sets out the procedure for resolving any contradictions when implementing said agreement. Before the issue of non-compliance with the JCPOA can be referred to the Security Council for consideration. Now, this issue must be considered in detail by the Dispute Resolution Mechanism in Vienna, that is the DRM. Paragraphs 36 and 37 of the JCPOA set forth a specific algorithm, a formula for conducting this process. So no matter how much the UK, France, and Germany tried to convince us that they supposedly used the dispute resolution mechanism all the way back in 2020, the fact of the matter remains. This mechanism was not just not exhausted, it wasn't even launched due to serious procedural gaps which were never resolved. Thus, the so-called notification the Europeans sent regarding the triggering of the snapback on the 28th of August 2025 sent to the Security Council was legally null and void. For that reason, the outcome of the 19th of September vote on the draft resolution aimed at maintaining the regime, lifting anti-Iranian Security Council resolutions, couldn't have had any legal nor procedural ramifications. In a nutshell, there was no snapback. UN Security Council Resolution 2231 lost its force on the 18th of October 2025. Against this backdrop, Western attempts to justify their groundless assertions using the UN Secretariat position do not stand up to criticism either. UN colleagues did take steps, specifically informing member states about the resumption of resolutions and recreating the website of Security Council Committee 1737 and its sanctions list. Well, these steps are simply illegal actions taken by the Secretariat in violation of Security Council Resolution 2231, as well as Article 100 of the UN Charter, which prohibits the Security Council and organization staff from receiving instructions from any government. Under such conditions, the Russian Federation sees no rationale for getting Security Council Committee 1737 back up and running, not to mention discussing its functioning at Security Council meetings. We deeply regret that Western delegations are insisting on trying to legalize their claims. This is having a negative impact on the work of the entire Security Council. The Europeans and their allies are simply holding hostage the issue of seat distribution in Security Council subsidiary bodies, demanding that it be linked with the appointment of the chair of the illegitimate 1737 committee. We'd like to underscore yet again, any such attempts are doomed to fail. We urge our Western colleagues to stop such groundless and unconstructive political paradigms, stop pursuing them, because they are dealing a serious blow to the effectiveness of our joint work. We cannot but remind you that the Russian Federation, together with China, has done everything within its power to prevent such a difficult, very difficult legal and procedural situation from coming to pass. At the height of disagreements over the snapback, we put forward a depoliticized and balanced draft resolution on a technical rollover of Resolution 2231 for a period of 6 months. If that document had been adopted, it would have helped us to freeze the situation for a little longer, giving the settlement of disagreements on the Iranian nuclear program without creating such a crisis at the Security Council, giving this opportunity a chance. Well, Western states and other delegations supporting them did not seize that opportunity. Subsequent events, especially those that we've had to bear witness to over the last week and a half, clearly demonstrate that diplomatic settlement was not part of the plan for the US and their allies from the very beginning. They knowingly raised the stakes. They whipped up hysteria surrounding supposed plans Iran had to get a nuclear weapon. They were never corroborated by IAEA reports, in contrast to what the US representative asserted today. This was done in order to undertake yet another military venture against Tehran and to ensure greater escalation of the situation in the Middle East and beyond. Against this backdrop, we'd like to remind you that the Russian Federation categorically condemns the act of military aggression against Iran by the US and Israel in violation of the UN Charter and the basic norms of international law. Such actions cannot be justified in any way, shape, or form. And the groundless and divorced from reality insinuations surrounding the Iranian program aimed at peaceful development of the atom cannot serve as rationale either. Linked to today's meeting, we cannot but underscore that while previously US colleagues had no legal grounds for raising the issue of resuming the anti-Iranian resolutions of the Security Council and the restoration of the 1737 committee, previously it had no legal rationale, now it doesn't even have any moral rationale. Our country will continue to do everything within its power to counter such attempts, will also facilitate all initiatives aimed at reverting the situation surrounding Iran to the realm of political and diplomatic settlement. For that reason, on the 7th of March, my delegation disseminated among Council members a draft resolution calling an immediate cessation of military hostilities by all parties. Our document was balanced, it was unbiased, and depoliticized. As we said yesterday during the vote, the Russian text was focused on condemning any strikes on civilians and civilian infrastructure, as well as the need to ensure security for all states in the Middle East and beyond. The text also urged all parties involved to immediately go back to the negotiating table. We believe that it is such initiatives, rather than attempts to use the Security Council to promote politicized and illegal paradigms, it is such initiatives that will allow the Security Council to fulfill its direct responsibility to maintain international peace and security. We regret that a number of Council members didn't find the strength to support the Russian draft. I thank you.
I thank the representative for his statement. I give the floor to the representative of China.
Thank you, President. China has just stated its position regarding the 1737 committee and its opposition to the convening of this meeting. China doesn't intend to comment on the committee's work. However, as a council member, China wishes to emphasize the following on the current situation of the Iranian nuclear issue and its path forward. First, the use of force is not the right way to resolve international disputes. Iran's sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity must be respected. The United States and Israel must immediately stop their military operations, refrain from attacking Iranian nuclear facilities under IAEA safeguards, avoid further escalation of the tension, and prevent the conflict from spreading across the entire Middle East region. All parties should maintain calm and restraint, fulfill their obligations under international law, and effectively safeguard the safety of civilians and civilian infrastructure. The international community should send a clear and unequivocal message opposing the regression of the world to the law of the jungle. Second, the Iranian nuclear issue must ultimately return to the track of a political and diplomatic settlement. I want to emphasize that it was precisely the United States that unilaterally withdrew from JCPOA, which triggered the Iranian nuclear crisis. It was also the United States that, in total disregard of its own credibility, on 2 occasions joined Israel and resorted to blatant use of force against Iran during the negotiation process, which rendered the diplomatic efforts futile. The United States, as the instigator of the Iranian nuclear crisis, its conduct violates the international law and the purposes and principles of the UN Charter. China strongly opposes to such conduct. China strongly condemns such conduct. We urge the U.S. to change its course of action immediately and return to the course of diplomatic negotiations and clearly undertake not to use of force and engage with Iran on negotiations and reach a solution that meets the expectations of the international community. The relevant European countries should cease to fan the flames. They should play a constructive role in easing tensions. China commends the regional countries and the IAEA for their mediation efforts and support their continued assistance in resuming negotiations to promote a peaceful solution to the Iranian nuclear issue. Third, fairness and justice must be upheld, and Iran's right as a state party to the NPT to peaceful uses of nuclear energy must be safeguarded. Iran has repeatedly affirmed that it doesn't seek to develop nuclear weapons. Even after its nuclear facilities were attacked, it continued to cooperate with the IAEA. and engaged in a constructive manner in multiple rounds of professional and pragmatic talks with the United States. Iran's sincerity should be taken seriously. IAEA reports and its Director General have both stated that there is no evidence indicating that Iran plans to manufacture nuclear weapons. The experience with the JCPOA demonstrates that comprehensive and stringent safeguards applied to Iran can fully ensure the peaceful nature of its nuclear program. Fourth, the starting point for Council actions should be to ease tensions and to safeguard lasting peace and stability in the Middle East. Such actions shouldn't be biased, nor should they become tools for sanctions and pressure to serve the political agendas of individual countries. The Council should help the parties build trust, bridge differences, and create favorable conditions for resuming negotiations, ensuring that dialogue proceeds smoothly and effectively in an environment free from the threat of force. A certain country should stop manipulating the Council for political purposes. Despite divisions among Council members, pushing for the reimposition of sanctions will only deepen confrontation and undermine prospects for a political settlement. President, the proper settlement of the Iranian nuclear issue bears on the authority and effectiveness of the global non-proliferation regime and is crucial to peace and stability in the Middle East. As a permanent member of the Council and a JCPOA participant, China will continue to uphold an objective and impartial position, enhance communication and coordination with all parties, build consensus, uphold justice, and play a constructive role in restoring peace to the Middle East and advancing the political solution to the Iranian nuclear issue. I thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for the statement.